Hello, honorable journalists. This is a happy and great day. We have an official visit from a good friend of mine and of our country, Xavier Bettel, who is the Vice Prime Minister of Luxembourg and Minister for Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade of Luxembourg. He was first here 11 years ago when he was the mayor of Luxembourg and helped the National Library of Latvia move books from one facility to the other. And today we had a very good talk, both about our common concerns, which are linked to the security situation in Europe and the Euro-Atlantic environment, about the Russian war and the situation in the Middle East, but also about what are we doing together in the EU, in NATO, and with other countries in the broader world. And how will we cooperate bilaterally in the Benelux and Baltic cooperation framework? And in the continuation of the visit, we will have an official lunch and a meeting with the president for Mr. Bettel. And a walk through Riga. I hope the storm will not come up again and we'll be able to look at our beautiful capital at the request of Mr. Bettel and Xavier.
Thank you so much. The fact is, yes, exactly. I remember being here as a mayor of Luxembourg City on invitation of the mayor of Riga, when you had the transportation from one library to another library, where you had a human chain helping really to bring one book to another. I remember at that time being mayor, and afterwards I got Minister of Culture, and we built a new library, and always wanted to do the same in Luxembourg. But because of the weather conditions they decided that it was not the best idea. But I loved it to see how young people, how old people, how people came together also to transport culture and to transport what we have also as a memory. You have to know that Latvia and Luxembourg are, not by history or by nature, but by alphabetical reasons, neighbors. And so Baiba is my neighbor in the European Affairs Council, and I had also, as a Prime Minister during 10 years, the colleagues. I remember Vladis Dombrovskis was my first colleague, then I had Lamdotta, and then I had a lot of colleagues as a neighbor, and Evika was the last neighbor I had, so I had a lot of Latvian Prime Ministers as a neighbor, and it was always a good relation. We celebrated also last year the 100th anniversary of diplomatic relations of both countries. But the fact is, we have different histories, we have different traditions, we have different languages, but we have also different geographical situations. And that makes it so important to be able to exchange, to visit, to see also countries where, and I have to admit something, and you know, for politicians to admit that we do mistakes, it's not always easy. But I remember exactly when our friends from the Baltic countries told us that the threat from Russia is a real threat. And it's not only a threat for neighboring countries, it's a threat for Europe. And Baiba belongs to the one who is always able to convince, to remember, because it's a fact when you don't have the same geographical situations that you don't have a history. You suffered from a communist regime. I'm not. But it is important to know that today the support of Ukraine, it's not a support just for Ukraine. It's also support for our values. It's a support for our common projects, which is called Europe. And under the leadership of your Minister of Foreign Affairs, it's always important to give us this rappel, like we say in French, of this anti-fatigue rappel, which is so important to remind that if you are on the first line, it is also for us. And that what you have a situation on your borders is something in our interest. And too often we don't look that far away. So we try to support as much as we can as Luxembourg. We supported also, and I've just been last week to Romania, where we have a presence of Luxembourgish soldiers. We have also in Lithuania common projects here. In Latvia, we also contribute financially to the depollution of a military site in Lielverde, and also a renovation of military school in Rudbaci. I'm sorry if my Latvian it's not that perfect, Rudbaci, but so for over 12 millions of euro, where we want to contribute also to the Latvian support and the efforts all you do, because if you do it, it's also for us. So we should avoid of thinking that fatality is reality, and that geographical situations make countries responsible for these situations. This is here the fact. It's also the fact when we have migration crisis. It's the fact that when we speak about the European project, it's also a project of solidarity. And it cannot be that just geographical situations make you responsible for all the common problems that we can get. So being solidarity is something which I really believe it's important to be here. It's also to show that even if you are neighbor and you see each other, it's important to come to exchange. I have to tell you, we have 11 Luxembourgers, 2 students and 11 Luxembourgers living in Latvia. So I can't speak about the big Luxembourgish community here in Riga, but it's not the size who makes it. It's the fact that also Luxembourgers come for holidays. I have my European Director of Affairs, when we fixed the date, she said, I'm with my husband here in Latvia for my holidays. So this is important too, to show that cultural exchange, but tourist exchange and economic exchange, where we still think that there is potential after the state visit we had last year to continue to deepen these relations, to continue to build on that. So thank you so much for welcoming us. You invited a colleague, but it's a friend who is here, and a friend who is very happy to know that we share the same values. And believe me, in the European Union, it's not always easy. It's not always easy. And it's important to have people like Baiba, who knows to understand and who is much more patient than I am to find common solutions for all of us. So thank you very much also for your leadership and for the patience you have that I still have to get.
Thank you to the ministers. The word to the media. Please present yourself, and who are you asking the question to? Hello, Ina Strasdani, Latvian television. I will ask a question in Latvian. So first, a question to Ms. Braže. Maybe you could outline more precisely what did you discuss with Mr. Bettel, and what are these potential cooperation opportunities economically and in defense and security? And for Mr. Bettel, I would like to ask 3 things, if I may. So firstly, how would you evaluate this process that there's already the first round of funding gone to Ukraine after these interest rates have been withheld from the Russian assets that are in the European banks, and Luxembourg is very well known as a country of banks, and you had this money, and there were several court proceedings initiated from dissatisfied clients. How did you manage this, and have you how this process ended, and has it ended successfully? You have been very critical about Mr. Orban's visits to Russia previously, saying that he has shown the middle finger to the Ukrainian soldiers by shaking hands with Putin, but still he is going there, and he doesn't hide his sympathies towards Russia. And how would you value this? And should the European Union not act more critically against these sirs? And how would you strengthen European security? How would you say? Currently, we are saying that the defense industry should be strengthened. What is Luxembourg's idea for this? Yes, thank you. We have discussed in detail the topical questions of the EU, for example, how to foster unity. You already mentioned these challenges, how to make these decisions despite other or some states' stances that impede on this unity. Of course, I won't go into detail, but we have this common understanding about the European Commission's next agenda and priorities. Of course, we have priorities in Latvia such as safety and economy and what will be the next High Representative, and of course, what could we expect from this official about limiting Russia and about support in Ukraine, and of course the situation in the Middle East, which is quite explosive, and it affects all of us. On NATO, of course, it is positive that the Prime Minister of Luxembourg announced the 2% of GDP spending on defense, which will ensure possibilities for procurements, for cooperation. Of course, this is not easy for Luxembourg, given the small scale of its military, but still this investment is very important, these 2%, and to ensure these defense capacities. And so we expect support to our defense capabilities, and we're great for Luxembourg for what they are doing, for example, in aid in air defense as well, for having a presence here, that the NATO has sufficient air defense capacities. And we will speak during the lunch more about bilateral things. We will have representatives of companies. We had a business forum as well recently. Some companies and enterprises in the technology field have started cooperation. From our side, we see that space technology, we have several companies working in this realm, so in cooperation with Luxembourg companies, Luxembourg is a large hub for EU and NATO satellites, and this would be one of the fields that are of interest to us. Thank you.
Maybe you will be disappointed, but the most money from the Russian central bank was not in Luxembourg, but in Brussels. So maybe Luxembourg has a reputation to have strong banks, but this time it's not Luxembourg. And for us, where it is important, it's that we agree that about the frozen interests that we are able also to invest them also for Ukraine. But the only thing which was my fear since the beginning was that we need to have judicial security. Because imagine tomorrow there would be a trial from anyone saying that this is not legal and that the money which is used to buy weapons to invest in Ukraine should have been paid back. Who will pay back? That's the only thing where I want to be sure that we don't risk a trial. But for the moment we have all these informations and everything. As soon as it's sure, we should do it. I think it's important, and we were always compliant on all the sanctions. About Viktor Orban, yes, it is a middle finger. He did. To the Ukrainians fighting on the ground against Russia, aggression, and then to go and to shake Putin hands. And I'm in favor of all initiatives for peace, if it's agreed and discussed with the Ukrainian parts, and if it's respecting international law. Neither one nor the other was the case here. And as I said in Brussels, there is one people who is so disappointed. That's Kim Jong-un. He's still waiting in Pyongyang for the visit of Viktor Orban for his peace trips. This was ridiculous to call it peace talks when you just talk with aggressors and not starting with the people who are the victims of the aggressors. The first thing is to contact them, to exchange with them, to listen to them, to see how you can be useful and not just visit all the aggressors. So it is important to say to Viktor Orban that his initiative was an individual Hungarian initiative. It was not a European initiative. It was not in the name of the 27. It was in the name of the Hungarian government. And it was not a peace talks. It was a visit of dictators. It was a visit of countries who are aggressors today and not peace-making talks. When you want peace, you start with the victims and you don't just discuss with the aggressors. And on the European security, the fact is, and don't misunderstand me, I told you we have a different history, we have a different geographical situation. As a politician, as a prime minister, during 10 years, I would never have imagined that once I would have to say as a Luxembourgish prime minister, and now as Minister of Foreign Affairs, that we have to invest more in defense. This was against all my principles in politics, because I always thought we don't need it. Why should we have an army of 1,000 people? Why should we invest so much money in defense? This was something not in my head. But I see today that we need it. We need to invest this 2%. As I told you, we have an army of 1,000 people. I cannot invest 2%. And when I started as Prime Minister, we were 0.4. 0.4. We are now 1.3. We will come at 2% in 2030. Would be, I remember when we had discussions with Donald Trump at the beginning, I did a provocation. I said, do you want me to buy golden guns to everyone? This is not what we want. So, for example, the figures I gave before of Luxembourgish support for military expenses here in Latvia, it's also how we can be useful in a union, in a solidarity project. Because I cannot invest all in my army, being so small. And so it is important to see how we can do it. On the other hand, for some countries it's very easy, because they produce weapons. And it's easy to invest 2 or 3% of your own economy in your own economy. I don't have it at all. Zero. So all the money I invest is in people, it's in other countries, and so it's not that easy also. But we will continue to do it. But we should also see that today we don't have enough production in our own countries. And I remember figures, it was by Federica Mogherini, so you have to look in the history books. Federica Mogherini gave us a paper about how I have to be careful about how I say, how we spend military expenses in Europe. With the Americans having 3 guns, having 3 helicopters, having 3 different things. Where we in Europe have 20 helicopters, we have 50 different guns. Where a production of one country or an Austrian gun won't be able to be used by a Spanish police officer, where a Spanish pilot won't be able to use a German helicopter. Instead of thinking also maybe to have a common industry, where we buy more efficiently, and so to have less expenses and more productivity. But the fact is that it's also national economies, because a lot of countries have their military industry, and they don't want to put it global if they can still sell national. So it is a long way to come. And I think that the next commission, and now Thierry Breton has done it, I don't know how the new commission will be, but in the commission we will have to have really a person in charge of seeing how we can have more useful expenses in defense industries in Europe, instead of having everybody producing and having a lot of expenses with not that many products.
Paldies ministram.
Mēs esam ļoti
Of course, we are truly grateful and appreciate the investment of Luxembourg into our security and defense. And I think this is actually a way we see how the region's security is reinforced. And of course, we as a border region, our role is very important. And I already told Mr. Minister about my trip to the borders and about the challenges and practical things which are linked, for example, to European countries' export to Russia and Belarus, and of course the the burden lies on our shoulders in some ways here. And again, the Luxembourgish investment here is an investment in all of our security and safety. We have a question from Bloomberg.
From Bloomberg News, my question to you, Minister Bettel, is also about Hungary. Ukraine recently sanctioned Lukoil's flow of crude through their pipelines, which affects Hungary and Slovakia. Do you see a role for the EU in mediating this dispute or another way to resolve it?
We should avoid decisions taken by one where others will have to take other measures because they consider that they are harmed. So I think especially with Ukraine today, when we need to see how we can get closer, we should avoid to create new tensions where we make it too easy for other countries, and especially this time for Hungary and for Slovakia, to say that they do not agree and then they will have to take other sanctions. And I remember the last discussions we had where it was, again, a crescendo of positions because of decisions of one. So I understand that for Ukraine, they look to harm Russia as much as possible. But what would be important, I think, in future is before taking decisions where they know that the end consumer won't be them, but other countries have to be around the table to at least be informed. Then afterwards, it's still the national decisions of the Ukrainians, where they have to decide what they want. But I think it's preferable to avoid in the situations that we have today, that we have tensions raising between the countries. But it's a sovereign decision of the Ukrainian government. But we shouldn't help already countries which are not the most yes, the most productive in finding common solutions, to find reasons to do even less.
In the same time, of course, Minister Kuleba assured us during the last Foreign Affairs Councils that the oil supply to Hungary and Slovakia will not be affected, that they will receive what they are obliged to receive, whatever decisions they make.
Paldies ministriem. Paldies.
Thank you to the ministers, thank you to the media, and the press conference is closed. Thank you.